Welcome back to Media7, where I'm talking to Phil Kitchen, Jock Anderson and Jenny McManus. Jenny, before the break we mentioned Bill Wilson and we mentioned your Judging the Judges feature. How did Bill Wilson fare in your feature? What did the lawyers say about it?
I think generally they felt that he'd only just been appointed. They were being kind because everyone likes Bill. They were being very kind, and they said he hadn't had really time to find his feet. And they would have, preferred a little bit more intellect, perhaps. But then you could make the same criticism of the entire Supreme Court if you listen to the barristers that I spoke to.
It was an interesting and I might say quite a brave feature because it did touch on the competence of individual judges. Were you concerned at all about being contempt by virtue of scandalising the court?
No, because we had all that sorted. When we first did Judging the Judges, which was 15 years ago in 1994, we did get an awful lot of flack from the Chief Justice and from the Law Society. We stood fairly staunch and we managed to deflect it away from us towards the barristers who'd spoken to us. Now, we didn't name any of them personally, but they were the ones who ended up carrying the can, and the Chief Justice came out and said it was unprecedented to criticise individual judges, yabba, yabba, yabba. What we said is it is important to the business community to know the foibles and the style and the judicial reasoning of individual judges because they pay huge bills. The litigants have a right to know whether or not, if they're appearing before a particular judge, they should just fold their tents and settle, rather than go through the lottery of a trial.
And it was quite different this time, 15 years on. You didn't get angry voices from on high saying you shouldn't do that, did you?
No, we didn't. They were quite quiet, and I think a lot has changed in 15 years. The whole content of the bench has changed too. Back in 1994, there were largely, well, basically grumpy, irascible old men. Very conservative judges. There was only one woman. They made an art form of being rude to counsel, particularly junior lawyers, the sort of thing that isn't tolerated nowadays. And what we found now, apart from one or two mavericks who stood out, like Reese Harrison, who stood out quite, and Susan Glazebrook on the Court of Appeal, they were generally quite a homogenous, boring lot. And I think that the Labor government appointed them. I think political correctness was very much at the front of their mind, and that is reflected in a lot of the appointments to the High Court.
So we've got a bench full of sensitive new age guys now.
And women. Of the 34 High Court judges, 7 of them are women. So we've got a lot more. We only had Sylvia Cartwright back in 1994, and she'd only just come onto the bench. And the lawyers were sort of patting her on the head and saying, well, we think she'll be OK, she'll do all right, that sort of patronising sort of rubbish. But, of course, she did very, very well subsequently.
Now, I wonder, the two of you are reporters who are, in theory, in peril of scandalising the court and being in contempt. Does that prey on your mind, and do you think that contempt should still exist?
It doesn't prey on my mind, no. I mean, I don't... Everything that we do gets scrutinised by our lawyers, and they're very careful in situations where you're looking at doing stories about judges, and so they should be.
Well, my reading of it could be perfectly true, and you would still be in trouble.
Yeah, I don't. I think it's a very much an outdated thing, that that concept. My view is that if we defamed a judge, the judge should be entitled to sue us for defamation.
All we were told, basically, by the Chief Justice was that running comments like we had undermined the legal system and somehow brought the judiciary into contempt. And our argument was, look, we have no problem with respect for the judiciary as a whole, but individual judges have to earn that respect. If they're incompetent or they're drunk, the public has a right to know about it. And if we erred, in the eyes of the Chief Justice, what we did was bring the locker room conversation of barristers into the public domain. And we think litigants and the tax-paying public, who pay, I believe, $630,000 a year per judge, plus superannuation, when you count all the hangers-on. They pay dearly for these people, and they have a right to know, because accountability is in very short supply.
Should we go a step further and have more transparency around the appointment of judges?
Well, the appointment of... Who knows? Who absolutely knows? When I did Judging the Judges, Paul East, who was the Minister of Justice at the time, I said to him, well, what are the criteria for a judge? And he said to me, oh, well, when you get to people of this level, we all know the sort of man we mean, don't we?
Well, we had an example just the other day when NBR tried to find out, what criteria there was and how do you become a judge, and do you fill out a form, or does you put your hat in the ring, or something, name in a hat, whatever. And with some reluctance, I think it was a 16-question little questionnaire was finally extracted from, I think, the Attorney General's office or somewhere in Wellington, and it was pretty pretty feeble sort of stuff, really. You know, basically asking, you know, have you got any debts? Do you owe the tax man anything? Have you ever been convicted? That sort of thing. But, you know, try to find out what the judges actually put on their applications is a totally different kettle of fish.
And I guess the argument against, say, making it subject to OIA would be that if you do that, it becomes political football, and we don't want that.
Well, it may or it may not, but I think there is certainly an area where there should be much more political, much more public scrutiny of the process, and I think that
and a register of interest.
Yeah,
I mean,
well, exactly,
why shouldn't there just simply be a register of interest?
No scrutiny
we still
at the
don't know. We know that in Justice Wilson's case that he supposedly did register his interest, but we still don't know what they were.
That's right.
So why?
And what about other judges?
Yeah. I mean, it shouldn't be up to a litigant to have to go fishing for, as has happened in this case, to have to go fishing to find out what the relationship, whether it's a business relationship, friendship and all the rest of it, is between a judge and senior counsel who are acting for the other side. They shouldn't have to do that.
But I think you can assume at that level that the judge, if you've got senior counsel appearing before him, they all know each other and they all drink together.
Yeah,
I think you can assume.
But
Jenny, this goes beyond just knowing each other. This goes,
yes,
in the Wilson case, it was a business relationship, it was a financial relationship, it was a formal relationship. This is more than just the boys or the girls standing around having a beer. But I think it goes one step further than that. I think this is where it attacks part of the constitutional independence of the judiciary. The judges and the courts expect the public, when they appear in their courts, to tell the whole truth, to make a clean breast of everything they know. All we are saying is we want the judges to do the same thing.
You appear on a jury. If you go to become a jury member, you're asked to disclose whether know. Why should it be any different for a judge?
Well, we are going to get something pretty public if, as seems likely, Justice Wilson opts to go before the panel. So I look forward to the media circus around that. Thank you all. It's been a feast for media watchers, but finally there is a result. David Cameron is Britain's new Prime Minister. This week's Newsmash looks back at the big night and the mornings after. We understand on a cultural level how British general elections work. Everyone has to stay up until an ungodly hour so that a few oddballs can get themselves on the tally. And they all have to pretend they're not even a little bit tired.
David Cameron set off on this marathon, a 36-hour, no sleep till Whitney, talking to fishermen, talking to bakers. Then he went back to his constituency, voted. Then he went home, chopped wood for 2 hours. Then he went to the count, and on the way to the count at 1 in the morning, he went to the pub. And then he had to go into a series of highly detailed negotiations on possible huge changes to the constitutional arrangements for the conduct of elections.
Even if it means being a bit scratchy afterwards.
So you're going to be Minister for Sleep then?
I'm going to be Minister for Sleep.
Meanwhile, Channel 4's alternative TV coverage provided all manner of surprises. That's a startled Charlie Brooker doing a little pee in his pants on live TV, as he revealed later to readers of his Guardian column. The BBC picked up the theme by projecting an oddly phallic infographic onto Big Ben. The nerves clearly built with successive editions of the national papers too. The Daily Express was damn sure with its first edition, still sure at 4 a.m, and frankly impatient by dawn. The Sun was breaking out the bubbly with its first edition, then slammed the cork back in and resumed its usual stance of hysterical hostility towards Gordon Brown, while the Mirror's swingometer went to the right. In the days that followed, the stress, or perhaps Rupert Murdoch's new compulsory staff methamphetamine regime, started to tell on Sky News journalists. Adam Bolton lost the plot with Labour spin maestro Alistair Campbell.
Alistair,
No, don't. You talk to me. I'm fed up with you telling me what I think.
I don't care what you're fed up with. I don't care what you're fed up with.
And Kay Burley harangued a mild-mannered electoral reform advocate.
They voted with hope. With hope.
Is that what they voted for or not?
Future.
Did they vote for that or not? That's
Yes,
exactly what they voted for.
And what they voted.
So why are you protesting against it?
We're not protesting.
So what are you
against
protesting
anything?
for?
We're protesting for
Well, you must be
something.
protesting against something.
Which all helped trigger a rather noisy live cross.
It's going to happen, but we're now in the process that a lot of people are worried about, which is
Polling, as far as this is concerned.
But through it all, the British have seemed determined to entertain themselves. Here's the lineup for the BBC's flagship Newsnight programme.
The XX.
Indie hipsters and all. And if one didn't follow Her Majesty the Queen on Twitter, one surely missed out.
One is starting to wonder if one's politicians could hit a cow's ass with a f***ing banjo.
And then suddenly the Queen was activated and a new Prime Minister was approaching Downing Street.
The new Prime Minister, David Cameron, driving in, yes, and a cheer there from the crowd in Whitehall.
But, you know, my cultural understanding tells me that woman in the crowd probably wasn't cheering. Might be along for 5 years. And that's our show for this week. Thanks to Phil Kitchen, Jock Anderson and Jenny McManus. And thanks to you for watching. We'll be back with Media7 at the same time next week. Until then, goodbye.